Howdy, this is Ryder, and welcome to part 2 of PC Culture versus Colonial Puritans, which is the third episode in my American Dream series. In the first part, we examine the meaning of PC culture and how extreme, far-left progressives are more like colonial Puritans than they are true liberals. Now, let's look at a living, breathing example of PC culture's Neo-Puritanism in action. Laci Green is a well-known YouTuber, social justice warrior, and sex educator who hosted the MTV online show MTV Brawless. Earlier this year, she made a video speaking out against censoring, silencing, and deplatforming opposing ideas and opinions. She wasn't necessarily changing her own beliefs, but just defending people's right to free speech and wanting to openly debate the issues that are now dividing our country and our world. Maybe in the hopes of finding some kind of middle ground that could foster peace, tolerance, and understanding.
After all, Laci Green, am the very pinnacle of a social justice warrior. My SJW-ness has been memeified with statements like, everything is problematic and there are more than two genders and America is racist. The red pill is a meme that refers to this realization that the world isn't nearly as simple as you thought it was. The question, of course, is what is the truth? What is the truth? And how bad do you want to know? I've recently found anti-SJW channels that are well-cited and reasoned, make some interesting points. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I agree with that, or I didn't really think of that. And sometimes I disagree, in which case, I still feel it's beneficial for me to listen and consider another perspective. Social justice communities lately have been arguing that bigoted ideas, this harmful speech should be suppressed because it allows the bigotry to spread and to be validated. I'm thinking of campaigns to get people's Twitters banned, book deals canceled, talks canceled, things like that. Ironically, this sounds very similar to the logic that is used by the right to censor sex ed. Information about sex has been deemed too harmful to hear. It'll encourage immoral behavior and speed social decay.
If we know anything about history, the suppression of ideas and speech of any kind can only lead a society down a dark path of the subjugation, oppression, and the inhumanities of entire groups of people. But for this blatant act of blasphemy, speaking out against censorship and promoting dialogue, she was exiled from the SJW community. In an interview on the Rubin Report, she goes into a little more detail about her experiences being a part of PC culture and the aftermath of her Red Pill video, which may give us a better understanding of the inner workings of PC culture and Neo-Puritan dogma.
Yeah, it's more about the word. It's all about the language. Yeah, I've had a lot of experiences like that, just moving through the feminist world and just being shown no mercy. Nobody ever wants to assume that you are just a person who means well, you know? You always mean the worst. It's always that you're a bigot. You are just a racist, you are just a transphobe, that's who you are, and we hate you for it. And that's kind of been my experience moving through this world, even though my whole thing is I don't think people should hate people because of their skin color or their sex or their gender identity or whatever. So there's just a lot of dissonance. And I've never thought that behavior was okay. I've never condoned the SJW stuff. And I've never, even though I've said and done a few things that are regrettable, I don't feel that on the whole my work embodies any of that. I think it is very different than that. And I'm very opposed to it. I think it's really toxic and destructive and very hypocritical.
So you do this video. You start saying some of this stuff. And really what you, more than anything else, the takeaway from the video is, I want to talk to people.
That's literally all the video says.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And I think that I want to talk to people because I think things have gotten a little out of control in the feminist sphere. It's super pro-censorship. Overtly we are going to campaign to get you censored. It's very overtly, we don't, the goal is to silence. No other opinions should be heard because it's oppressive. I'm oppressive now. Yeah, I mean, for me, I have lost a lot of friends, people who I have let into my home, who, I've made dinner for many times, who, again, we've had the moments, we've laughed, we've cried, who turned on me in a heartbeat. The moment I said that I was against censorship. A lot of those relationships I felt like were kind of fake to begin with. Like, you always feel like you're being judged. That's kind of what I feel like hanging out with people who are super, super SJW feminist types.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't relax, you can't tell a joke, you're like worried that everyone's going to be offended all the time, and it's so easy to say something wrong. It's such a bizarre, arbitrary high bar, and it's not a good precedent for friendships and relationships, and I never liked it, you know? So it's been sort of this ripple effect as people just sort of, you know, cast me out of the club, and that's been very revealing, you know? If this is what gets you thrown out, then fuck you, throw me out.
This shows a perfect example of how an entire culture can think that they are so morally pure that everything that threatens their ideology is proclaimed evil. And those who can't or won't conform to these exaggerated moral standards, no matter how impractical or impossible to achieve, are demonized, shunned, and or excommunicated. To add further credibility to her perceptions of these issues and experiences, it's always good to have a little backstory. How is she qualified to confirm the similarities between PC culture and the noxious side of religious doctrine?
And I grew up in a very religious, insulated community, and as a teenager I had a lot of problems around sexuality stuff, with sexual identity stuff and safer sex, not getting pregnant, you know, making good decisions, I was trying to be safe and healthy, and there were no adults in my life that I could ask about this stuff, and I carried around a lot of sexual shame and guilt about who I am. So in 2007 I hopped on YouTube and just sort of started ranting to my camera about Mormonism and about, you know, how messed up I think it is. Started focusing more on helping teenagers like myself who were in these really insulated environments, had no one else to go to, who were hopping online, trying to find people and information, you know, to deliver that information to them, to be a friend to them, and build a community around that. That was sort of this retreat from these very, you know, oppressive religious environments.
Anyone who's lived under the inflexible rules of a person or community, who are excessively judgmental and set such high standards that are sometimes impossible to live up to, can relate to what she's saying. Then she experiences almost the exact same repressive structure and self-righteousness within the SJW community.
You did this once already in life. You did this when you were 16 or 17.
Bingo.
And
it's
then,
just a replay for me. It's literally the same exact thing.
Yeah.
It's like you have this community that is organized around moral principles, and you feel really repressed and shamed and restricted whenever you commit a thought crime, and you have to confess and you have to apologize when you make a mistake, but your apology is never really good enough. You always are deep down an original sinner, you know, and you have to be cast out. You're going to be excommunicated if you make too many mistakes. It's the same exact thing.
And so
as
many
being
of them,
Mormon.
so many of them hate religion, but they'll give you original sin, which is a whole other thing.
It's these moral systems, you know. They all work the same way.
Right, whether they're moral, whether they're religious or secular,
right?
And
that's like on another note, like that's a big question that I'm trying to figure out, is how do we create moral systems for humans without devolving into this trash?
Just the idea of PC culture has never quite set right with me. It's impossible to change a person's mind when they are unwilling. Personal change and growth needs to come from within, not from any outside source, for it truly to take hold. As I illustrated in part 1, just the words political correctness conjure up images of lying politicians saying what the public wants to hear, stepping on the least amount of toes so they don't lose any votes, but never for one moment planning on honoring any of their promises. In my eyes, this is exactly what PC culture is all about. Walking around on eggshells so you don't hurt anyone's feelings and not telling them the ugly truth. That not every person you meet, even close friends and family, have your best interests in mind, especially if it conflicts with theirs. And that life can be a very unpleasant experience, even more so if you're naive and unprepared. These are universal truths that no one can change no matter how hard they try, because you can never totally control other people and their motivations. And there will always be people out there who don't give a shit about you. Hell, even people with the best of intentions will put you and yours behind them and theirs. In my opinion, constantly trying to be politically correct just seems like a very naive, self-destructive, dishonest, and harmful way to live life. On that note, I'd like to leave you with a final thought from Laci Green.
Feminists and leftists need to reclaim their causes.
and need to stand up to people who are trying to bastardize and distort what we're actually fighting for, who are using shame, censorship, anti-science, manipulation, bullying, all this kind of bullshit to push a radical political agenda. I think people who are not down with those kinds of politics need to step up and say something about it. Even though it's scary, you might lose friends, you might, have to make sure you're in a place to deal with it, just like my own story. Make sure you can deal with it, but do it, because look what's happening.
Yeah.
This is not going to help liberalism. This is not going to help feminists. I don't care what they say. I do not see this helping anyone. All I see is alienation, people getting angry and hostile to things they actually do support. All of the antis, every anti-feminist that I've talked to so far agrees with me on this basic shit about social issues. They agree on the trans stuff. They agree with me on gay rights. They agree with me, and that's not to say everyone will, but a lot of people, this is just to say a lot of these outspoken figureheads are turning against this bullshit, and in the process, the real base causes, what we're fighting for, is being lost. And that's why I felt like I had to say something, ultimately, is because, holy shit, all of these people who were all in this together are now fighting over things because of these crazies. We gotta distance ourselves from that.